How's it going, everyone? What I just played there is actually something that I came up with unexpectedly while I was making this video. It's just some stuff that I worked out that goes over the changes for the first half of the tune, If I Should Lose You, which, for those who don't know, is a relatively common standard that jazz musicians will play sometimes. While about 95% of that doesn't necessarily have to do with the specifics of this video, the little fragment of it that remains originally comes from the example that I'll be using later on in this video for demonstration purposes. And as it turns out, this same short little musical fragment was actually the initial seed of inspiration that basically sparked the creation of the rest of that entire example. Without even originally planning to compose a musical example like that, just by playing around with the initial idea the way I'm going to show you guys in a little bit, it still led to the creation of something musical that in the end I was still inevitably satisfied with. I just think this type of thing could be useful to realize because it can show that we don't always have to force good musical ideas to come out of us in a way where we're always intentionally sitting down with the purpose of trying to compose something right then and there. And oftentimes, if we just have trust in the process of what we're doing in practice and consistently put in solid work, we may find that a lot of times good ideas can just come to us, or at least the initial inspiration for them, just by putting in good work. So make sure to stick around until the end of this video to really see what I'm talking about here. I understand that the next couple of minutes first here may seem a little redundant or preachy, but just bear with me. Understand that everything that I'm trying to say here is done with good intentions. I'm just trying to be helpful and make everything nice and clear for everyone. And before I get into it here, I'll just let everyone know that if you like that example I just played there, I made a PDF of it that's available on my website as well as my Patreon if you want to check it out. And it includes notation, tabs, and all the harmony that's going on. Alright, so hope you enjoy the lesson. So, if you want to develop efficiently as a jazz guitarist and strive to sound as good as you possibly can, I believe it's important to be regularly practicing actual musical material that you truly like a lot and genuinely resonates with your sound. This material can be acquired externally from things such as listening, transcribing, and other educational resources, or internally by means of our own composition. And if you're really focused on being a jazz guitarist, this can and should include linear material and chordal material as well. If you're familiar with my videos at all, you may already know that no matter what the piece of material might be, I generally like to compartmentalize the things I may do to practice it into primarily working on the mind component, the body component, or the spirit component, just as a basic model. All three of these components are significantly important to me, and that's why I like to organize things in this way, because it makes it easy for me to know if I'm consistently hitting all the things in practice that I feel I should be working on. But understand that all we're really concerned with for this video here today is the body component. With the body component, the only objective that we need to be concerned with is the sheer ability to play the idea on our instrument. This involves developing a confident ability to execute the idea as fluently as possible with a good sound, sense of feel, and proper phrasing, and to know the idea well enough so that you could potentially play it in any key or register, or perhaps with a specific kind of fingering or phrasing for an intended effect. When we focus on these sorts of things, even though we aren't really exercising our ability to apply any given idea so that if we were to hear it in the moment when playing, we'd be able to know where and how to effectively use it, These sorts of other things are still massively important to develop. And by isolating this objective in practice without any concern for things like application, it makes it a lot easier, in my opinion, to efficiently progress. I'm only emphasizing this point because, from my perspective, oftentimes whenever musical ideas are taught in jazz education, it seems like the things pertaining to the mind component or harmonic understanding and application are being disproportionately stressed, which can obviously have an influence on what you're focusing on when you're actually practicing any given idea. Things like the mind component and harmonic application are obviously still important, and on this channel, we'll get there when we get there. But please do yourself a favor and realize that you just need to be able to be a good guitar player first, and actually sound good when you play whatever it is that you're going to play, just like it probably was for most of us when we all started playing guitar. Alright, so now that I've finally said all the extra things that I wanted to say, I can now get to the main topic of this video that pertains to the title. I'm going to share what are the main differences in my practice between working on chordal material versus linear material when I'm primarily focusing on the body component. I already extensively covered how I'll generally practice linear material throughout multiple videos that demonstrated several different examples for you to check out. As rambly and detailed as these videos may be, the basic process comes down to two main things. The first thing is taking an idea and working out all possible fingerings for the idea that may potentially lay within the 5 positions or fingerings of the cage system. Depending on the idea, you may be able to get one viable fingering in all 5 positions, but sometimes you won't. And sometimes the idea may even be available to play in 2 different octaves within the same position, but all of that really depends on the uniqueness of the idea. So, just to show you a really quick example of that, I'll take this 2-5 line that I got from Kenny Burrell. Originally it was in this key. Right, but I'll put it up here. Right, and I can take that throughout the fingerings, right? So in the next position, I have it available again. Right, and the next position. Okay, then the next position. Something like that. I can do this in another octave in this position. Right, and then the next one. I can come out of position a little bit, but it works. Sorry. And I can also play it over here. Sorry. Right, but you get the idea. And for this particular example, I'm kind of thinking only within one key that I'm moving throughout the positions of the cage system there, but technically I'm thinking 2 different scales or shapes for the 2 chord and the 5 chord there. I kind of talk in detail about that type of thing in episode 70, I think, but yeah, it all just depends on context, and I'm using that system of fingerings to guide me. The second main thing that I do, which is extremely important to me, is to take all the viable fingerings that I may get and basically move them up and down the fretboard in usually either half steps or whole steps. Alright, so say I do, just one of these shapes. No, half steps. Sorry. Right, maybe I'll move it down whole step. Right, but you guys get the idea. This part of what I'm doing here can be really easy to overlook, I think, but don't underestimate the importance of doing this part of it, because I really believe it's crucial for your results with all of this. I really explained the importance of all that in episode 64 if you want to check it out. Now, when it comes to how I'll practice chordal ideas with a focus on the body component, I basically keep one of those 2 primary things exactly the same, and then I'll substitute out the other thing in favor of doing something else instead. if you're an intuitive person and can follow the logic behind why I may really practice things in this kind of way, you may be able to realize that the part that I keep consistent is the part that involves taking an idea and moving it up and down the fretboard in half steps or whole steps usually, right? So it's pretty self-explanatory, but if I were to show you an example, what I'll do is I'm going to take a fragment from my Charlie Parker confirmation etude that I just spent a bunch of episodes breaking down, and I'll leave a link in the description for a PDF of that if you want to check that out as well. But I'm just going to take a little snippet of that, all right? And this was actually in bar 2 of the example. It's basically a 1-bar minor 2-5-1, all right? And it was originally in the key of like going to D minor. So basically the original snippet goes like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So that's an idea that I can use, like a voicing sequence that works for a minor 2-5 that basically fits within one measure. That last chord is just an anticipation of the minor chord in the next beat, all right? So as obvious as that sounds, I'm going to take that idea and basically move it up and down the fretboard, right? So I started over here, right? And I'll move it down half steps, right? Get the idea? Going whole steps, maybe one more, right? And just like with the linear material, if you've never done this stuff before and you start to do it now, you'll soon realize how beneficial this really is, because I think this type of thing is overlooked. I know I'm a broken record, but just by literally taking the same shape and moving it up and down, you're learning it and reinforcing it in a way where you really know it, that's independent of any particular fret or position that you're used to associating that sequence of voicings in, because that's where you originally learned it. So you're trying to know this in an independent sort of way that isn't just attached to some musical context that you originally learned it in, if that makes sense. Now, the other part of this that I'll do that's different from what I do with the linear material is basically, for whatever idea I may have, I'm going to try and move it across different string sets as best as I can. And almost in a similar fashion where I said with the linear material, everything depends on context of the idea. So that'll really determine like how many viable possibilities I may get in the different positions of the cage system and whatnot. But with this, you know, depending on how shapes and voicings can move across string sets, it may not exactly transfer over perfectly, but you may be able to alter things in a way where you still get the gist of the same idea and can still use it, all right? Now, this is a lot more simpler than it just sounded there. So basically, for this particular example, let's say I started over here where I ended before. Okay, this is basically like a minor 2-5 in the key of A flat minor. It's like a B half diminished. Then this is like a E flat 7 sharp 5. And then this is like my A flat minor 11 that I resolved to, right? So if I take all those chords, we can really, with this example, only move it down one string set. So this voicing over here, it's basically a second inversion minor 7 flat 5 chord. It's dropped 2. If I put this now on the middle 4 strings, we have this. Okay, this is actually the more conventional location of this chord, starting on the A string, all right? And then the next chord, which I was playing like this, okay, now I'm going to move this, because these are the middle 4 strings, to the bottom 4 strings over here. Okay, so I go from this to this. Okay, and then here for the minor chord, so this is where I said everything depends on context. If we ignore the root note and just take this, this can be moved down over here, right? And that works. Now, in regards to that being usable, we could realize that unless you have another lower B string where you can kind of take that root and put it on the next string now, it doesn't really become practical anymore to be able to play this with the root on the bottom. But it's all good. It doesn't really matter. We're still dealing with the same basic chord progression and conveying the same sound. So in this case, just because we had to, you know, omit the root over here doesn't matter. And it's just showing us that this is another way that we can kind of use this sequence of voicings and kind of find it in other areas. Not that I really need to elaborate on this now, but I figured I'd add that when we're dealing with chordal ideas now instead of linear ideas, every individual chord that might be in the idea is like its own shape that we may be able to say is probably based around one of the 5 main forms on the guitar that relates to the cage system, like I always talk about. But because we're dealing with a sequence of voicings that we may be using in a chordal idea, it doesn't matter if we're like actually playing them like chords or we might be breaking them up more in like a fingerstyle type of thing. But either way, we may be sort of perceiving the idea as a sequence of shapes. So it doesn't really make sense to kind of take the ideas through like the 5 fingerings, because each chord basically is its own thing. So you wouldn't really be able to like take them through the fingerings and have a new sequence of shapes, if that makes sense. So that's why we move them across string sets instead of through the fingerings of the cage system. So, this one doesn't really have that many options, but once you move things across string sets, you could basically move it up and down like I showed before. So if I take this now, this one, and I move it down just a half step, what do I get there? That's the part of my example that I played at the beginning, and that was basically the seed for everything else that sort of came around it. If I play it for you now in context, it was like right here. Alright? I basically realized, alright, well now I moved it down a key. This is like a minor 2-5 in the key of G minor, and I know that that's a chord progression in that song there, so I'm like, oh, I could use that there, and I basically built the rest around that and used that as the initial inspiration. So now you can see what I'm talking about, how just putting in this work, and I barely even showed you the work in this episode today, you can sort of discover other ways of using things that may sound cool to you and inspire a lot of really good musical ideas that you may not have even expected. Now, this concept of basically taking chordal ideas in particular and moving them around and really exploring the full range of them past the point of where you may conventionally associate them with is really an exciting thing to me, and every time I do this work, it really shows me how I can discover a lot of cool sounds just by literally taking something that I already know and moving it all over the instrument, alright? I really think it's a good thing to do. Now, in the next episode,
hope you're ready for the next episode. Hey,
I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit more, just because I don't want to start rambling too much today and, kind of really dive into that in the next episode, so it won't really be too much. But hopefully with what I've already shown you here today, this can already inspire you to want to try to do some of this stuff and take ideas and try moving them around on your own or across different string sets and whatnot and see what you can get out of it, alright? So, hope you're excited for me to continue this. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you gave it a like and consider becoming a subscriber as well as a contributor to Patreon, where you'll get all the PDFs on this channel for only $5 a month. And if you're new to this channel, my name is Derek Plavin. This is basically like a free online jazz guitar course that keeps unfolding in a logical order, so I would usually recommend that you go back to the beginning and watch at least the first 3 or 4 episodes to see what I'm all about. And I'm also available for private lessons and other types of services if you're interested, so you can go to my website to check out information and all of that. So that's it, and I will see you guys in episode 82.
Swinging and playing the blues. That's what we about.
I try to help you.